Okay, first review this week is going to be Idea, Starting Point Book Number 1 of LitRPG series from Vasily Mahanenko. This is 393 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited, and here's the author's description. Vasily Mahanenko's new LitRPG series set in the universes of his world of the changed. Modern times, genius physicist Artyom Kuchaev found himself facing the darker side of the world we live in. Integrity is met with a laugh and a rat race instead full of people out to grab whatever they can. Where big money is on the line, no betrayal even of loved ones is a bridge too far. But Artyom couldn't bring himself to conform. Instead, he decided to make a change in himself, if not the world around him, his work, surrounding, country. However, the world wasn't ready to let the genius go. It was benefiting too much from him. In one moment, everything was turned upside down, and Artyom's freedom was exchanged for prison, his noisy colleagues for morose cellmates, and his spacious labs for tiny offices and restricted research institute. All that remained of his daily drive to make the world a better place. And that just left the tiny detail of how to actually make that happen. So there we go. Full disclosure, I received advance copy for review. I purchased a copy when it became available. Okay, this is kind of a weird story in that you can read it as a standalone story. It is absolutely completed. You don't have to read anything else in the Changed Universe series or the Alchemist series, which are the ones that are connected to this. However, I think if you've read those series, you're going to like this a lot more. And looking at the other reviews of the story, for people who haven't read like the Universal series, this is apparently super dark for them. As I was reading it, there were things in here that are like, they're like cloning and mind scanning and artificial reality control systems, like trying to change people's thinking through like almost as Pavlovian shock treatments through implants. And I was reading like, I've read this before, and I realized as I was reading it that it didn't have the same dark impact on me because I've read about these systems, advanced versions of these in the other series, in the World of Change, in the Alchemist series. And that's what this really is. This fundamentally, I want to call it a prequel because it has original characters. It's set on our Earth, and those other stories set onto the like multiverse universes almost. But this is like the start of where the technology comes from those other stories. And I appreciate it because I'd read those other stories, and you wonder like, man, who came up with this like terrible like system of like RPG systems and advancement systems, and they're all super detailed in the other worlds. And it's interesting to see them developing in this one and how they're originally purposed for control systems and ways to change people implicitly for their benefit according to like the main character's point of view. But still, some other readers have thought like, this is a real dark Russian story because they're using technology to kind of, not necessarily mind control people, but definitely to implement behavioral changes for, essentially for their own benefits. And a lot of the story has the main character being kidnapped and taken away from the world and being forced to do research and explore things. And there's a whole like independent story here that doesn't have anything to do necessarily with like those other universes, but you see a lot of like the technological developments, like, like the more primitive versions of them in this story, and seeing how they're like this is like such a well planned like a system, and that the author is like, these terrible systems were initially implemented for the benefit of mankind, and they were conceptualized by people in power wanting to maintain control, but the main character does it to help people, and it's just like such an interesting combination of like, there's like the unforeseen consequences of developing technologies and stuff, and like the dark ways that it can go because people in power abuse them. And it's a bunch of really neat, cool stuff, even on its own. It's just that, if you've read the other series, like, you can see like the connections and how it eventually, like sometimes hundreds of years in the future, goes super terribly wrong, or how it twists, or how it changes and evolves as it progresses through the universe. So it's kind of a neat thing. The game mechanics in the story come from an interface that just hands out quests and monetary rewards, being traded information, items, resources. If you've read the other series, this is nothing new. This is a more primitive version of that. So it is what it is. But it's interesting as a reader to see how those systems start here and how they're going to be implemented in those other stories. Overall, I enjoyed the story. I liked it. It can be read as a standalone story, but I think the people who get the most out of it are the people who've read the Alchemist series or the World of the Change series. I think they'll appreciate it the most just because they'll see all the little nods and all the little like connecting things. But for me, still a good time with it. Score of 7.5 out of 10. That's Idea starting point with a score of 7.5 out of 10.